2025. I can see that we have present councillors Allison, Anderson, Clark and Cowie. Apologies from Councillor Fagan. Also present today are Councillors Falconer, Ferguson, Frame, Fulton. Councillor Gray. I'm not seeing you present. Oh, sorry.
Councillor Loudon's intimated a hand up there.
Okay, yeah. Councillor Loudon.
Oh, hi, sorry, it's taking a while. Morning, everyone. Just to say, Councillor Gray is currently stuck in traffic, so she's hoping to join us.
Okay,
Right,
thank you. So we will keep an eye out for Councillor Gray. Also present today is Councillor Johnson Dempsey. Just looking to see if we have Councillor Equi. I'm not seeing Councillor Equi. Also present today are Councillors Keat and Kerr and Lambie. Councillor Lockhart. I can see that you have joined remotely. Also present today are Councillors Logan, Loudon, Mars, McAllen, McGeever, Razak. Councillor Scott. No, I can't see you present. Also present is Councillor Thompson, as is Councillor Walker and Watson. Our external representatives present today, we have Naomi Baxter and Jennifer Gaffney. Just going to check for Christine Hall. I'm not seeing you present. I have apologies from Joan Lennon. Angela Milton is present. I also have apologies from Gillian Storey. We have a number of officers in attendance, and with that, I'll pass back to yourself, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. And we've got a few members indicating an interest to speak. We've got Christine Hall waiting. Will we take that before we start the business?
Hi, it's just to say that I'm here.
Thank you, Christine. Thank you. Okay, first item is a declaration of interest. Do we have any declaration of interest? No, none intimated. Thank you very much. Agenda item number 2, minutes of the previous meeting held on the 10th of June. Can we approve that as a correct record? Councillor Loudon.
Thanks very much, Chair. Page 5 into page 6 on today's papers. We've got here that Councillor Johnson Dempsey had requested an update at the previous meeting of the committee in relation to school transport, particularly the cuts to school buses. And we had been advised, and it's been minuted here, that we had an undertaking from the Interim Head of Education Support Services and School Estates that we would have an update on the subject at this committee. I'm just wondering why it's not on the papers.
Look, David, I pass to yourself for this. My understanding was Councillor Dempsey's request was regarding the, was it 11 wage? We made a representation to the Chancellor of the Exchequer, but David, you might be able to clarify that.
Yeah, there was a timing issue about the paper coming to committee, Councillor, and what was agreed is that we would do an all-elected members briefing, which went out on the 25th of June 2025, outlining the total saving made for the changes in secondary school transport, and that's why it's not on the agenda on today's committee.
You have a supplementary, please, Chair?
Yep, no problem.
Just for clarity, it's at the very bottom of page 5. It says Councillor Johnson Dempsey requested an update on the position in relation to Councillors Loudon request at the last meeting on school transport. So it was on this subject. The minutes which are before us here that say that we'll have an update at the next meeting of the committee. If there's a suggestion that that isn't in fact what was agreed at the committee, could we have those minutes amended, please? Because that's not an accurate record of what's happening. We're either being told different information now or there's different information recorded on the minutes.
Elizabeth Ann, could I ask you just to make a brief comment on that?
Hi, Councillor Loudon. It was my understanding that members were circulated a briefing note. I'm not sure if David's able to come in on that.
Yes, the briefing note was circulated on 25th of June because it was felt that the information that was requested out with the committee cycle would be better to be given to all members rather than waiting to the next committee. And this is why the briefing was put out to all elected members on that date with the information that was requested within the briefing note. Thank you.
The supplementary, Chair, please.
Yep.
I appreciate that a briefing note was provided, and thank you to the officers for the work which was behind that. The point was not just to get the information. As I said, I think during the past, and correct me if I'm wrong, somebody, I think the last 4 education committees have asked for a report to come on this issue, and it wasn't just about getting the information, it was for the sake of scrutiny. And I made a request at the last meeting of the Executive Committee before the summer for an item of urgent business, which was turned down by Councillor Fagan. And the purpose was scrutiny. It wasn't just to get these figures. I've well got one final question, which is just as an example. I'm sure I'm not the only elected member in here who's had reports from their area of issues with the number, just the sheer volume of pupils who are trying to access public bus services in the morning and at peak times and in the afternoon. I've had complaints not just from young people themselves and from their families, but for other service users as well. I've had sight of a communication that's gone from the council to another elected member on this issue as well, which said that after a 2 or 3 week period, when the bus cuts had come into force at the start of term, that the council were going to be meeting with transport operators to have a discussion about how things are going. And I would be really interested to know if we were going to get a chance to see that information and, more importantly, scrutinise that information in public in front of a committee.
David, can I come to you to respond to Councillor Loudon's request?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. Met with bus contractors last week who have been engaged thoroughly in the process. They've welcomed the collaborative approach of discussions both prior and post implementation of this change. They have reported a number of new services on certain routes, larger vehicles on certain routes. They have noted that in some instances buses, the pupils aren't moving all the way back to the back of the bus, so sometimes the bus can seem full when it arrives at a stop, and they've been instructing their drivers to make sure that everybody's on and should be up the back as far as they can to allow more passengers on. We're also looking at other new routes from other contractors who have contacted us recently to try and build more capacity within the system. They do recognise there can be a problem when schools come out all at the one time, and it's not everybody getting that very first bus. It's about thinking there's another bus in 10, 15 minutes to try and make sure that the travel patterns settle, and obviously young people get to know when buses are available, when they can get to and from school. We also, pardon me, will have the after-school clubs starting just about now in our secondary schools, and again that should stagger the pattern of pupils coming home and hopefully alleviate some of the initial capacity issues we've had. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. I'm going to take in Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chair. Just following on from that, it does, as Councillor Loudon has said, it does state in the minutes he undertook to provide an update, including figures at the next meeting of the committee. I fully understand what David has set out, but at the same time, this has been presented as if that has been agreed at the last committee, so I don't think we've really had much of a satisfactory answer as to why that was then decided against. And there's nothing to stop us getting that briefing note at the time and also having a paper coming forward to this committee. So I still don't understand why we didn't have a paper at this committee. I would like to understand what representations you made yourself, Chair, to get this before the committee today. Because it also, I think it's under item 5, it also notes, the Chair noted the member's concern in relation to the timeline for receiving updated information on school transport costs. I would also like to know what you have done to ensure this came before the committee today, because obviously it hasn't.
Lindsay, can I come to yourself first to respond to Councillor Clark?
Thanks, Councillor. We'd be happy to bring a report in November, just that would cover it. We're probably too early in the process at the moment to give you a full analysis. We're only sort of week 5 into the school time. As David's mentioned there, he's met with the bus companies. There's an ongoing dialogue and discussion. So an overview of the implementation of the changes in August we can bring to the November committee, if that's what people are requesting.
I'm also happy to pick up this in my capacity as chair. I'm happy to meet with yourselves following the meeting to see how we could get some more thorough information circulated between the committee members, if that's something you'd be willing to do.
I mean, yes, that is always welcome. But I think the main point is that we need to ensure that there's public scrutiny and an undertaking from yourself to ensure this is on the agenda for the next meeting.
Absolutely. I can give you that assurance. Thank you. With that, can we... Oh, actually, sorry, we've got 2 members online willing to speak as well. Could I ask Julia Mars?
Thank you, Chair. I welcome the report that you're discussing, bringing forward. Could I also ask that in terms of the impacts and the potential mitigations that are being put in place, that considerations given to asking schools where pupils potentially are losing part of their education, where schools, in an attempt to help pupils where they may be having to use a public bus that may not suit the times of school, may be losing time out of their education and being allowed to leave school 15, 20 minutes early, which I know has happened in the past. And I think it's important. I don't think anybody at this committee would like the idea of children losing time out of their education every week.
No, absolutely. I'm absolutely satisfied to make sure that we highlight Councillor Myers. David, do you have anything to add to that one?
Just that obviously we would expect all children to spend the full day in school to make sure they maximise their opportunity within education. We will work round about, again, working with parents about bus timings, capacity within the service, as I said earlier. And again, we can maybe look at attendance as part of a paper that comes in November, just in case there's any issues in and around that. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Frame.
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair. It was just on the part that David was talking about the consultation with the bus companies. I'm a bit complex why this wasn't taken before the schools went back. You see about bigger buses and how we can do for that kids aren't missing buses. That should have all been taking place before the schools went back, so we didn't have the disasters that have happened already. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comment, David.
Yeah, I've actually been in consultation with the bus company since December 2024 to look at, as we knew the numbers that were coming off with this proposed change, to see what they could put in place to make sure that they had more robust public services for our young people going to and from school. The meeting after the term was to see how things had started, to see how it settled down, to see where the capacity issues were and anything else we could do in collaboration with the companies to make it easier for young people to get to and from school. Again, they've commented that the behaviour of the pupils has been very good on the vehicles so far, and there has been, again, this issue of maybe children not moving up the bus and the issue at, when school finishes, when everybody's come out at the one time. Other than that, they're saying that the services are running pretty well within the public service network. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. And could I just ask that when any further information becomes available from dialogue between ourselves and the contractors, that we can circulate that with the committee members, or if it's more appropriate, we can add it to the paper that will come at the next committee meeting. Thank you. Councillor Razak.
Chair, I was just going to point out that we're supposed to be on the minutes of the meeting, and we're discussing
Thank you, Councillor. I was aware that the question stems from minutes of the previous meeting, so we're now coming to an end. There's no more questions been intimated, so with that, I will agree for the minutes of the previous meeting to be agreed. Sorry, I'll ask for the committee to approve the minutes of the previous meeting.
Agreed.
Thank you. And that takes us to agenda item number 3, Education Resources Revenue Budget Monitoring 2024-25, and can I ask Louise Harvey to speak?
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, everyone. So this is the first of 2 reports to committee this morning on the revenue budget, and this is the final report. The first report is the final one for financial year 24-25, covering the revenue budget position from the 1st of April through to the 31st of March, and the second will cover the new financial year 25-26 as at the 11th of July. At paragraph 4 in page 15, this contains updated information on the final position for our Scottish Attainment Challenge funding for education for 24-25. And in relation to the Pupil Equity Fund, spend during the financial year was 8.655 million, with 631,000 still to spend. And this was carried forward to meet the commitments in schools for the period April to June, the last part of the school session. And this was in line with the PEF guidance and was approved as a transfer to reserves at the Executive Committee in July. In relation to the Strategic Equity Fund, the actual spend was 1.768 million, with 90,000 still to spend of the 24-25 allocation, and the 90,000 was used by the end of June, again in line with the SAFE guidance. In terms of the main financial implications within the report, paragraph 6 on page 18 reports that the final outturn position was a minor underspend of 4,000 after, again, the approved transfers to reserves. And this was broadly in line with our probable outturn already reported for the resource. The position has been reported and approved as part of the Council's final outturn position at Executive Committee, again on the 25th of June. And the approved reserved was the 631k that I've mentioned for the Pupil Equity Fund carry forward as outlined. The resource position is outlined in Appendix A, and the position reflects broadly underspends in our staffing across services, including early years, due to turnover and vacancies, and this offset the overspend on our teachers' costs, primarily due to the cost of cover. Overspends within our mainstream and ESN transport and our school placements, which are all demand-led. We also had increased costs of janitorial and classroom supplies due to pupil numbers, and underspends in our footwear and clothing grant reflecting current demand. Over-recovery of income from our early years fees and other local authority income for children placed in our schools, and this offsets the cost of the external placements. So the cost pressures highlighted to committee across the financial year have been managed within this position in line with the projections, and overall the reported position is aligned to the probable, as I had mentioned. We have our standard budget environments, and these are proposed at the bottom of Appendix A and reflect budget movements in education budget since we last reported, and also a number of year-end accounting transactions, and cover the following areas: the establishment of budget to reflect year-end accounting requirements, carry forward of the committed budget for ASL and teacher costs, and the realignment of budgets to reflect service delivery within our PEF programmes, and also the devolved management scheme in schools. So if I can refer committee back to paragraph 2, the committee is asked to approve the following recommendations: that the education's budget for 24-25 to the 31st of March was a minor underspend of £4,000 after the approved transfers to reserves, and that the proposed budget environments are approved. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Louise. Committee, the recommendations are on page 17. Do we have any comments or questions? Councillor Loudon.
Thanks, Chair. Just a brief one. At 6.3, and there's a section about increases in janitorial and classroom supplies because of pupil growth. And that's that's what it says in the main report. And then in Appendix A, for the same subject, and we're talking about this increase in costs, it's also talking about inflation. I don't think any of us that have been out speaking to schools would be surprised to hear that inflation and increased costs are playing an important role in that cost going up there, and quite frankly any of us that have been shopping over the last year as well. I just wondered if there's any sort of further breakdown between the two, because I think this is going to be an important thing to keep an eye on going forward.
Louise, can I come with yourself for that one?
Yeah, we can certainly give the impact relative to the pupil growth, because we obviously have the pupil numbers within our schools. In terms of inflation, it really we don't fund any additionality for inflation beyond our big contract prices, and it is often within the schools to manage that, but it's often just dependent on the type of classroom materials that they are buying. But we'll certainly give some information relative to the pupil numbers and how we calculate the pupil role allocation each year.
Thank you.
Thank you, Louise. Thank you, Councillor Loudon. Councillor Allison.
Couple of things. Cost of teachers was overspent due to demand for cover across the year. We've done various things over a period of time, such as employing cover staff full time rather than just immediately when they were needed, which is more expensive, and also the cost of transport, which shows no sign, as you say, which shows no sign of easing. What are we doing to address these issues in the future, rather than just accepting them today?
Thank you very much, Councillor Allison. I think for clarity that was the cost of staff, and yeah, thank you, Stuart.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Allison. And I think that bit about overspend on teachers or teachers' absence cover, it's a difficult thing to be able to predict with a great degree of accuracy any particular absence patterns. But as you rightly point out, we take a number of steps to make sure that absence cover in our school is managed well and maintained well. You recognise that we have the area cover pool, as we refer to it. That's 240 FTE teachers who have permanent contracts based in our schools that we can deploy to cover long-term absences, maternity leaves and such like. Increasingly, we're beginning to see that being used on a short-term basis where teachers have requested changes to work patterns, reduced working week, which is putting a wee bit of pressure on there. And one of the things that we're doing is to look at the processes for agreeing and mitigating and backfilling some of that. We also have an additional 55 FTE in our secondary schools as part of the secondary absence cover scheme, which allows some of those teachers to be deployed on a permanent basis in individual schools, and it means that the cover agreement we have with the professional associations, rather than a central expectation after 3 days, becomes after 15 days, and that allows schools to plan and manage their own. We currently also have 115 FTE across the system of additionality beyond core, and that's been part of the Council's requirement to maintain teacher numbers. What we are trying to do is to use some of that now to look at absence patterns, and one of the things that we're finding, and one of the reasons we've had issues last year, is around difficulty in recruiting in certain subject specialisms in secondary schools. For example, home economics, business studies, last year mathematics was a difficult issue. So what we're looking at doing is trying to anticipate the areas that are banned by subject where it's difficult to fill, but as ever we're at the mercy of absence patterns, depending on winter flus and various things. But what we are trying to do is be as proactive as possible around the things that we can control, and that would include changes to working patterns, temporary working arrangements, and how we recruit. We've been able to recruit. Our schools are fully staffed at the start of the session, but we are mindful that we are now beginning to see some vacancies, and as I say, luck would have it that it's always in those difficult to recruit areas, so we're going out with individual adverts for that. So it's always, I suppose, a movable feast, and what we do is we try and anticipate as best we can and manage the process within those resources. However, if we do find ourselves in situations, and sometimes we do find an overspend, where there's an entitlement to absence cover that we can't meet within those areas, then we will bring in ad hoc daily paid supply, and we do have a supply list there, and that does tend to be where some of those additional expenses come into play. We monitor that on a period-by-period basis, and we do have a weekly meeting where we have an overview of the level of staff absence, a level of unfilled cover requests, and how we're going to manage those. So it's an area we're working hard on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stuart. Councillor Allison, would you like to add anything further?
Well, yeah, there was also the question on transport. And can I add to that, do they have an accurate figure yet on what we have saved with the change to the distance for school transport?
It should be in the papers, but I'll let one of the officers touch base on that. David, Stuart, ideally, who takes this one? About inflation, Stuart. David, sorry, thank you.
I'll just take it on transport. Thank you, Councillor Allison. Yeah, the exact figure was in the members' briefing back on the 25th of June. £2,031,000 was saved in the change to the secondary distance criteria. Obviously, with the other demand-led transport, you know, if you're qualified for primary and with ASN transport, market forces dictate, obviously, some of the increases we've seen over the previous years. We are looking at different things, particularly within ASN transport, to look at different routes, look at different vehicles, and create greater capacity within the system, and obviously work with our colleagues in the fleet services to see how better we utilise our own internal vehicles to try and stop the increase in costs moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. Councillor Allison, is that okay?
Thank you.
Thank you. If there are no further questions, can I ask the committee to approve the recommendations?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Agenda item number 4, Education Resources Revenue Budget Monitoring 25-26. And back to yourself, Louise. Thank you.
Yeah. So the next report this morning for me is the first report of the new financial year, 25-26, and this covers the revenue budget position for the resource from the period 1st of April through to the 11th of July, which is period 4 of our financial year. Paragraph 4 outlines the new year budget position for Education's Scottish Attainment Challenge Fund programmes, and for 25-26 we have £9.594 million for PEF, which comprises the full year allocation of 8.963 million and also the carry forward from 24-25 of the 631,000 as outlined in the previous report. And for the Strategic Equity Fund programme, we have a 25-26 award of 2.475 million for the financial year. In relation to PEF, as at the 11th of July, we have spend and commitment of 2.895 million, with 6.699 million still to spend. And this includes our PEF staffing from April to August that was in our schools, and further reports will include the staffing costs for PEF for the new school session from August 25, when that's available. In terms of our spend for the Strategic Equity Fund, the commitment to date is 2.203 million, with 271 million still to spend, and this does include the full year staff costs through to the 31st of March 26 for the SAFE programme. And we'll continue to update committee at each meeting on the Scottish Attainment Challenge position as we move forward. So turning to the main financial implications of the report, paragraph 6.1 on page 24. The resource is projecting an outturn for 25-26 of a break-even position on our revenue budget. And it is an early forecast for the resource, particularly since it's a July position and doesn't reflect the start of the new costs for the new session. Variance explanations are outlined in Appendix B, and we're covering some of the main points we picked up the last time, but we are foreseeing underspends in our staffing and our APT staff costs in relation to early years. And again, this is projected to offset some of our costs of teachers cover, overspend in relation to our mainstream transport, ASN transport, our external placements, and again the cost of janitorial supplies and classroom materials. There is also underspends in our core budget and an over-recovery of our early years income from fees and charges, and also again the income from our other local authorities as last year, which is balancing the overall budget position. We have a few key areas that we're highlighting for committee, and an update on the cost of transport is included given the most current information that we have received from SPT. So the level of underspend reported in the report for mainstream transport was at a level of 1.089 million, and we can now update committee that this has been reduced to 279,000, and that's a result of the Q1 forecast that we've had from SPT and the reduced costs in the region of over £2 million that David has just highlighted there. So there does continue to be cost pressures, however, in our ASN transport via our taxi contracts, and this is included at a level of 2.260 million. In relation to teacher numbers and the reduced class contact time, we're updating committee that given we didn't have to restore our teacher numbers to 2023 levels, the budget identified of 4.2 million as part of the 25-26 budget strategy is being transferred back to reserves to support the budget strategy for the council, including pay award. It is noted, however, that there is still a risk in relation to the national discussions on reduced class contact time and the financial implications for councils across Scotland. COSLA, local government and the Scottish Government are engaged in this matter, and it is suggested that funding would need to be provided for the implementation of the policy. If funding is not provided, is not funded, this will be added to the council's budget gap, and further savings would be required to balance the budget. However, we will continue to update as this matter progresses at a national level. In terms of our standard budget environments, these are again proposed as set out at the bottom of Appendix B and reflect updates to education's budget from the 1st of April through to the 11th of July and establishing of the new year revenue budget for the resource. They cover in the main budget realignments to reflect how we have delivered our services around our devolved management scheme, PEF and EMA, our transfers from corporate items in relation to the local action fund and footwear and clothing grant, creation of budget to reflect external income around the holiday play schemes and the developing young workforce funding, and also the transfer from reserves in relation to the PEF carry forward that I've mentioned. So if we can refer committee back to paragraph 2, the committee is asked to approve the following recommendations: that the forecast to the 31st of March 26 of a break-even position on education's revenue budget as detailed in Appendix A of the report is noted, and that the proposed budget environments are approved. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Louise. The recommendations are on page 23. Do we have any questions? Councillor Loudon.
Thanks, Chair. This is about 6.4 on page 24. First of all, I was just reflecting on what David said on the previous paper about market forces, because I think it's relevant to this budget paper going forward too, when this comes to us over the year. We're some of those localised market forces. When we've got the administration of a big local authority making swinging cuts to transport, we don't just sit in a wee bubble without affecting the marketplace. But anyway, at 6.4, we've got an overspend, a projected overspend for ASN taxi transport. I just wondered, now I know if I ask questions about this, I appreciate that it's a demand-led service, so that will change through the year. But I just wondered if we've got more of an idea at the moment about whether that's to do with the cost of contracts in comparison to previously, or how much of that is because of the demands for the service.
David, can I come yourself for that question?
Yeah, some of that will be in and around as I said, the increase in costs, other than the number of pupils travelling. We are very early stages into the new term, so some of these contracts are settling down at the moment. We have endeavoured, as I said earlier, to look at how we route particular contracts now, put more children on vehicles where they can cope with additional children on vehicles to make sure we try and get better value from the marketplace. But certainly we'll be able to look at that in more detail as the term settles down, and certainly can get back to you on that, Councillor.
Thanks, David. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Councillor Loudon. Councillor Anderson.
24-25 transport and plant budget, the line prediction costs were set at 18.3 million and the final cost was 21.4 million. A 3 million overspend, that was on page 21. If you fast forward now to 25-26 budget, the transport and plant budget line prediction costs weren't set at 18.3 million as it was in 24-25, nor the 21.4 million, which was actually spent in 24-25, but it was cut to just over 17 million. And we already have a predicted overspend of 3.3 million. Well, my question really is, why was the budget not increased in line with the actual spend in 24-25, and why is it being cut from the 24-25 actual spend?
Louise, can I ask you to respond to Councillor Anderson?
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. We can provide detail of the component parts of the budget. However, you'll note from our reports through last financial year that there was a lot of additional and temporary reserves used to fund the financial position. So although it looks like there's a decrease in the budget across 24-25 through to 25-26, it's just reflecting the fact that additional funding had been added to the budget in 24-25 to support the position. So that funding is no longer available. The 3.349 was the position at period 4, the 11th of July, but in the commentary I have been able to note that the update is a reduction just to 280,000, so that will be changed. It was really just that update from SPT was after the preparation and the reporting of this position. So come the next period reporting, and you'll see that probably through the exec papers as well, there is a reduction of that 3.349 million, but there isn't actually a reduction in the core budget. It was the temporary funding that we used to support the cost of transport in 24-25 that makes the budget look less now.
Thank you very much, Louise and Councillor Anderson. Councillor Mars.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. Members will be aware that the additional contributions to national insurance to the UK Government will affect all resources of the Council. I'm aware that for the housing revenue account funded by tenants, there's an additional payment of £300,000 has already been paid for the part year that this policy has been in place. I'm wondering what the impact of these additional contributions will be on the education budget, and whether we have a part year figure, and whether that can be added to future reports, please.
Louise, can I ask you to respond to Councillor Mars?
Just actually, if you can give us a wee second, get the figure. We have reflected the receipt of the ENICs in the revenue budget for education, and I'll just give us a wee second. Yeah, it's 7.5 million has been allocated to the budget for the impact of the additional employer contributions in relation to the change in the policy.
Wow. Yes, that is a significant figure. I certainly didn't spot that as a standalone figure, and I think it's something that we absolutely need to keep an eye on. If it could be more obviously made in reports, that would be very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mars. Graham Booth's going to add a supplementary bit of information to that.
Yeah, it was just to give overall context on that. In terms of when we're pulling together the council's budget for 25-26, we had noted in the reports in terms of being approved that overall for the council we were looking at somewhere in the region of 15.5 million in terms of general services, in terms of the costs that have been having to be managed from the start of April in this financial year. And again, as part of setting the budget for this year, we had identified that funding, with some of it coming from the government, and also some, as I say, that we had to manage ourselves, just in given the shortfall in funding that was provided. So it was 15.5 million overall for the council, but 7.5 million of that was, as I say, specifically for education, which is a figure Louise has quoted there.
Thank you very much, Graham, and thank you very much, Councillor Mars. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just to get back a bit there, I was saying about maybe an easy solution might be to get kids to share cars with transport, and I would ask to err on the side of caution there, because I know a lot of people that do share cars, and really, as a business that does this, and these kids have got special needs, special things that they need, and some of them can be temperamental, and for the sake, most importantly, the children, the escorts and the drivers, I'd ask us to watch what we're doing there. If we're asking kids to share cars, we've got to err on the side of the caution with that. Just a wee comment there. Thanks, Chair. Thank
you very much, Councillor Thompson. If there are no further questions or comments, can I ask the committee to approve the report? Sorry, that's wrong. Ask the committee to approve the recommendations.
Agreed.
Thank you. Agenda item number 5, Capital Budget Monitoring 24-25, and can I ask Graham Booth to speak to the report?
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. Item 5 is the final capital budget monitoring report for last financial year, 2024-25, and the purpose of the report is to advise committee for the spend for the full year to the 31st of March. The resources spend was included in the overall position reported to the Executive Committee back in June. Section 3 gives a background and explains the budget position for the year, which was a total budget of 8.371 million, and that budget was unchanged since we last reported to the Education Resources Committee, which was back in March this year. At Section 5, we are detailing the financial implications, and at 5.1, noting the total programme for the year was 8.371 million, with the final spend position for the year of 7.039 million. And as noted in Section 5.2, this underspend of 1.3 million reflects a profile of spend across a number of projects where spend will be incurred early in the new financial year. Overall, the programme underspend reflects the timing of spend across the 2 financial years, and the main projects responsible for the overall programme underspend are detailed at the bottom of Appendix B. And this appendix provides a list of the continuing projects into 25-26, along with their estimated completion dates. At Section 5.4, we're also noting that any underspend in the projects, along with the funding, will carry forward into the new year as required, and an update on the New Year programme is detailed in the separate report that I'll take you through shortly. So I would refer committee back to recommendation in Section 2 of the report and ask that the Education Resources budget of 8.371 million and a final spend position for 24-25 of 7.039 million be noted. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Graham. The recommendations are on page 29. Do we have any questions or comments? Councillor Loudon.
Thanks, Chair. Please stop me, Graham, if this is going to be the next report, but I wasn't sure if it was going to be. The list we've got, I think it's Appendix B, yeah, it is on page 32 of the projects where there have been underspends that are carried over. Where are we up to with all of those? I know a number were due to finish over the holidays in July, one in August, and then a couple that are going into September.
No, happy to take that at this point, just in terms of when everything's going to be. So in terms of the update, I think that you're right, the majority were over the kind of holiday period, particularly in some of the kitchen adaptation and things like that, just in terms of obviously the time and the work. So my understanding is that the majority are completing or close to completion. There might be some slippage in a couple of projects, but certainly by October time, they should all be complete. And as I say, the one there we're noting that was throughout 25-26 is the school's ICT, which is just a rolling kind of programme there, but the majority should be by October is the latest update that we've got.
Thank you very much, Graham. If there are no further questions or comments, can I ask the committee to note the report?
Agreed.
Thank you. Agenda item number 6, Education Resources Capital Budget Monitoring 25-26. And back to yourself, Graham.
Thank you, Chair. Moving into the new year then, the first for the financial year 25-26, and this reflects the budget and spend position to the 11th of July, which is our accounting period 4. Again, Section 3 given the background to the report and explains the budget reflects the capital programme for the new year as approved by Council back in February, and this has been updated to include updates at the Executive Committee in both June and August. Section 5 details the financial implications, and at 5.1 we are noting the resources total capital programme for the year of 5.970 million. And this budget is based on the original programme of projects approved back in February, and it's been updated to include the budget carried forward from 24-25 as per the previous report, and also a couple of adjustments to the programme approved at the Executive Committee in both June and August. And these adjustments total a net increase of 466,000, and they are shown in the bottom of Appendix A on page 35. And these relate to the adaptation and improvements at St John Ogilvie High School, and also the realignment of some fees in relation to our City Deal projects. So based on the current information, the budget of 5.970 million also reflects the estimated level of spend which we can achieve this financial year. At 5.3, we're noting a full forecast spend for the year, and for information, we're also noting actual spend incurred to the 11th of July of 674,000. So I would then refer committee back to recommendation in section 2 of the report that the Education Resources Capital Programme of 5.970 million for 25-26 and the full forecast spend be noted. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Graham. The recommendations are on page 33. Do we have any comments or questions? None have been intimated. Can I ask the committee to note the report?
Agreed.
Agenda item number 7, Education Resources Workforce Monitoring, 1st of April to 30th of June. Can I ask Elaine to speak to the paper?
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, everyone. This is a familiar report to you all and is a standard workforce monitoring report to provide you with an update on the employment information for the period the 1st of April 2025 to the 30th of June 2025 for the resource. Looking at section 4 within the report, you'll note that the absence figure for the resource for June was 4.4%, and that represented a decrease of 0.6 when we compared ourselves to May of this year. However, when we look at June last year, the figure has increased by 0.3%. However, you will also see that the June 25 figure is 1% lower than the council-wide figure. As we always do when we do our absence percentage, we do a projection looking at the following year in terms of 25-26, and the resource is projected to have an absence rate of 5.1%, which is compared to the council-wide average of 6%. And as I've provided at previous committees, you will know that personnel provide support, and we do case conference discussions with the managers, and that's about making sure that we're providing the appropriate support and advice to our employees to deal with, what can be quite a number of complex cases, and ensuring that our employees are being dealt with in line with their policies and procedures. Moving on then to section 4.2 of the report, which outlines the occupational health information, which you will find in Appendix 2. You will see that there were 471 occupational health referrals made during this period, and that represents a decrease of 71 when we look at the same period for the previous year. Again, if you look at Appendix 2, you will see that that's primarily within a reduction in occupational health medical referrals and in physiotherapy referrals. And really just to reassure you all that that does not mean that we are not referring individuals appropriately in line with those occupational health referrals. It will always just be about a timing in terms of when those would naturally be happening or when an employee requires to be reassessed. Similarly, in terms of physiotherapy reductions, that can be caused by two issues. And again, you will know from perhaps hearing in previous reports, most of our employees that access physiotherapy usually do so whilst they're remaining at work. So it doesn't necessarily mean that they are off sick, but you will know that any employee that goes off sick with a musculoskeletal absence will be asked if they want to be referred for physiotherapy, and it could be that employees are taking that up through, you know, an alternative route through their own, whether that be through the NHS or elsewhere. Moving then on to section 4.3 of the report, which outlines the accidents and incidents, which again are found in Appendix 2. You'll see that there were 323 that have been investigated and categorised as detailed within the report. And again, similar to what we've reported previously, there is a reduction shown in there and compared to the previous period. But that then is around, we've moved to the new system, so we have gone back to these are being recorded and reported by the individual in terms of that self-service, and we're getting more up-to-date and accurate information. So the period from last year represents a couple of different reporting methods, so until we get to that regular time so that we can actually make sure that we're comparing like for like. Moving on then to section 4.4 of the report, which outlines the employee relations information, you will see that there were 8 disciplinary hearings held during the period, 1 grievance hearing and 2 dignity at work complaints raised. Section 4.5 outlines the analysis of leavers, and there were 37 during this period that were eligible for an exit interview, with 10 exit interviews being conducted. And obviously you will know that we try and encourage people to participate in the exit interview process, but it is voluntary. Section 5 outlines the staffing watch information, and you'll see that the resource is showing a decrease of also 37 employees from the previous staffing watch return at March 25. So with that, I would refer a committee back to section 2 of the report and ask you to approve the recommendation to note the employment information for the resource for the period April to June. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Elaine. The recommendations are on page 37. Do we have any comments or questions? Councillor Thompson.
Just a brief comment. A very encouraging report. Thanks for that there. It's good to see the support you offer, and over the years I know you've doing that and you'll continue to. So thanks for the report. Very encouraging.
Thank you very much, Councillor Thompson. If there are no further questions or comments, can I ask the committee to note the report?
Agreed.
Thank you. Agenda item number 8, school holiday dates for session 2026-2027, and can I invite Gary Lambie to speak to the paper?
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. This paper provides committee with proposed dates for school holidays in South Lanarkshire for session August 2026 to June 2027. The proposed term dates are set out in Appendix 1 of the paper. In reaching this point, the resource has considered 3 key areas. First, are legal requirements under the Education Scotland Act 1980, requiring schools to be open for learning 190 days each year. Secondly, the benefits to parents in being as close to holiday arrangements in neighbouring authorities as is reasonably practicable. And finally, the views of our parents on the dates proposed. Section 4 of the report relates specifically to this and shows the results of an online consultation with parents. Around 850 responses were received, with a majority in support of the proposed calendar. It's also worth noting, Chair, that these proposed dates take account of the planned date of local government elections in May 2027 and provide information on how this would be accommodated should that date be changed. If agreed, these holiday dates will be published on council and school websites and included in related documents such as school handbooks. This will allow parents and carers to plan for the session ahead. With that, Chair, I would refer committee back to the recommendations in section 2 of the report.
Thank you very much, Gary. The recommendations are on page 45. Do we have any comments or questions? None have been intimated, so I will ask the committee to approve the report.
Agreed.
Thank you. Agenda item number 9, Education Resources Workforce Plan 25 to 2027, and I'll come back to Elaine for the report.
Thank you, Chair. So the purpose of this report is to provide you with an update and seek approval for the Education Resources Workforce Plan covering the period 2025 to 2027. For a bit of context, the plan will support the council plan that covers the period 2022 to 27 and aligns with the council's workforce strategy. Principally just to ensure that we have the right people in the right roles at the right time to deliver the high quality services for the resource. Section 4 goes through the workforce planning process that we followed to pull this all together, and that was developed through engagement with myself and with each of the heads of service, along with Gary, in terms of resource management teams. We looked at, what was happening across the industry in terms of what was happening in the education sector, as well as looking at the workforce data, and had a look back at the previous actions that had been presented to cover the period 22 to 25. In doing so, we use a structured toolkit in terms of workforce planning, and that was to make sure that we were identifying the strategic priorities, and we were then focusing on targeted actions and what we were going to do to deliver that. Section 5 gives an overview of what those key workforce priorities that were identified were, and not surprisingly, obviously recruitment, attraction and retention being one of the key ones. And that, I suppose that's not dissimilar to what you will hear in terms of presentations at different committees across the resources. As Stuart indicated earlier in terms of one of the earlier papers, we obviously have challenges in recruiting for specialist subjects, as well as then looking at some of our leadership roles. That looking then against the age of the workforce, and as we always do in terms of that ageing workforce, and the rising demands that we have in terms of our increased additional support needs offering. Looking at the actions there, what we have said that we will target recruitment campaigns, we will look at our career progression pathways, and that is to support any succession planning. As well as that, we've obviously got transformation as a key area, and that along with looking at the budget constraints as well as the cross-council demands. We're having to then say, well, what is it we have to do in this area? And that's about enhancing our digital learning, looking at climate education, any service redesign, and aligning all of that in terms of any national reforms. As well as that, another key area is the skills gap. And again, that a lot of this all links, because then we go back to that digital, there was gaps in digital, looking at our trauma-informed practice, sustainability, and our ASN-related skills. So again, these are the key areas that are coming through. So with that, again, it's about that continued targeting, how we can ensure that continual professional development and our leadership development in any training that we have to do. Looking at then the delivering of the key activities, so it is about making sure that we have a need for our staff to be resilient and that our structures are resilient, and that we're looking at engagement. So that's about maintaining, and that, I suppose, and the actions are to ensure that we maintain our statutory staffing levels, we improve our workforce agility, we're supporting all the digital platforms, and we obviously encourage the multi-agency collaboration. And finally, in that section is around looking at our employee wellbeing, and that is with a focus on our maximising attendance in terms of managing our absence and our issues that are within our employees. What do we do in terms of offering that resilience? And again, we have a good employee support, but it's about making sure that our employees can access that, and it's about ensuring that we are engaging with our employees. At the same time, obviously, we have very strong trade union partnerships within the resource. So it's again looking at that. What can we do to enforce that? Our mentoring, coaching, and recognition in terms of initiatives. Section 6 outlines how we will monitor the process, and you'll see that the plans are going to be monitored through resource management teams. And we also plan to do an annual update that we will provide you with an update on the actual action plan that's contained within the report. So with that, obviously I appreciate the actual workforce plan is quite a meaty document, and there's a lot of reading within there, and that's me just giving kind of a brief overview. But with that, I would refer committee back to section 2 of the report to approve the Education Resources Workforce Plan for 25-27. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lynn. Thank you very much for the comprehensive report and for all the work behind the scenes in pulling that plan together. Very well done. Members, we are approaching 11 o'clock for a 5-minute meeting. Councillor Clark has intimated his wish to speak, which I'm more than happy to take. Just cautious of the time, so if any other member would like to speak, I'll take Councillor Clark's prior to the break, and if there are any subsequent ones, I can take them after. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much to Elaine for the report. Similar to what Councillor Thompson said before, I know there's a lot of work that goes into this area, so thank you for that. I'm looking at, under the appendix, Education Resources Workforce Profile, starting on page 59. I'm looking at the breakdowns in various categories. In terms of protected characteristics, you've got a gender split and an age range. I'm wondering, has there been any thought as to why there has only been gender and age in terms of protected characteristics, and why we don't have a split for others such as BAME, minority ethnic and so on?
Thank you. Because this is primarily to deal with workforce planning and looking at making sure that we have employees in place, the focus in this will be around age more than anything else. And obviously we know that we've got a high number of females within the service, and that's to take in. Obviously we know we've got a lot of maternity leave cover that we need to have place. So this is primarily around that workforce profiling. We obviously do, in terms of our Equalities Mainstream report, provide a breakdown in all of the other protected characteristics, so it sits in that report and reported through that forum. But in terms of the workforce profile, that's these were the key areas that we were focusing on in terms of what was required for the workforce plan. Hopefully that helps.
Thank you very much, Elaine. No further questions or comments have been intimated. Can I ask the committee to approve the report? Oh, Councillor Loudon, sorry, I apologise.
Thanks, Chair. No, you're okay. It's because you said you'd take questions after the break. I'll make it quick. It's on page 61 about absence figures, and it's to do with area cover. I'll say, first of all, just tied into what Stuart was saying earlier, I appreciate the amount of work that goes into sorting cover and how much effort that takes and how much organisation. We've got a table here where we've got absence rates for different localities, and we've got area cover as well. It's sitting much higher than not only the average, but for any of the locality figures, it's about 2% higher. Do we know why that is?
Elaine.
The one thing I would say is, obviously, because of when this process was started, this information is now out of date, in terms of the period it's covering. There are different reasons in terms of the average rates fluctuating across each of the geographical areas. And I wish I had a crystal ball to be able to predict some of that. It is, obviously, as I've reported before, in terms of the work we do along with the management teams, it's about providing support. Unfortunately, we do have, a number of our employees have complex health issues, difficult and traumatic sets of circumstances that we try and support to ensure that we can encourage people to come back. Where we are working on is just to, try and put a focus on each of the areas to reduce it across the board. And if there is anything that would trigger any concerns for ourselves, we would link very much with the service managements, to see, there's a particular area at issue in this area. What do we need to look at? So there's nothing that has come across specifically, Councillor Loudon, but it's something that we work very closely with the resource to make sure that we look at that. I would say that the levels are going down a wee bit, and we've put quite a considerable focus on that, but it's something we keep a close eye on anyway.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Lynn. Councillor Loudon. We have reached 11 o'clock, so I'll ask the committee to take a 5-minute break. If we can be around 6 minutes past 11, that would be very helpful. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I think we're all back in the room and online. just to recap, agenda item number 9, can I ask the committee to approve the Education Resources Workforce Plan 25-27? Thank you very much. Members, we're going to the items for noting section. I have asked the officers to speak to the reports, every report, given the breadth of content and some of the really good work and the work that's been involved in bringing the papers forward. But I have asked them just to bring out the key information, just for time considerations and because of the nature of the content. So we'll start with agenda item number 10, response to Children and Young People's Commissioner, and can I invite Ashlyn Boyle to speak to the report.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everybody. The purpose of this report is to advise the Committee of South Lanarkshire Council's formal response to correspondence from the Children and Young People's Commissioner Scotland regarding the national report, This Is Our Lives, It Matters a Lot, putting children's rights at the heart of education. Section 3 sets out the background and 3.1 outlines the recommendations for change in the Scottish education system informed directly by children and young people. Recommendations are structured around 5 themes: culture, curriculum, personalisation and support, assessment and qualifications, and purpose. The report holds education authorities accountable by acting on recommendations and evidence from children and young people and meeting the requirements of the UNCRC Incorporation Scotland Act 2024. Sections 3.4 and 3.5 outline that children and young people must be recognised as rights holders and active participants in education reform. The Scottish Government is committed to rights-based education system, and feedback highlights areas for improvement with children's voices central to the process. Section 4 outlines South Lanarkshire Council's responses, and the Commissioner requested responses on views on key recommendations, actions to be taken, key milestones, recommendations not taken forward with reasons, contribution to system-wide recommendations, and support required. The Council's response is outlined in Appendix 1. We looked at the views, the actions, milestones, challenges, system-wide contributions, and support required. Appendix 2 highlights the good practice within the Council, and that is under the headings of participation and engagement, curriculum, personalisation and support, assessment and qualifications, and purpose of school. 4.3 outlines that the ongoing progress will be reported through statutory plans and reports. The Commissioner will publish child-friendly updates in September 25, a full progress report in April 26, and a request for further update in January 26. Ensuring children's rights remain central to education in South Lanarkshire is a continuing priority. I refer back to Section 2 and ask that the content is noted.
Thank you very much, Ashlyn. The recommendations are on page 23. Do we have any comments or questions? Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much for the report. I've got no problems with the response itself, but it's something we have encountered in other committees, such as climate change recently, where we're getting reports of responses, consultations after they have been submitted. I understand there's issues about it not lining up with committee cycles. There can be kind of immediate or short deadlines for responses. So I get those issues, but I'd appreciated going forward if we could be kind of mindful and seek where we can to bring consultation responses to committee before they're submitted, so they can be scrutinised and changed if need be, and also ask for your assistance in that as well, Chair, to help ensure that we're able to scrutinise these before they go out. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Councillor Clark. I think you hit the nail on the head during the committee cycles, but I'll happily take that up and give you some feedback following the discussion. Thank you. If there are no further questions or comments, can I ask the committee to note the report?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Agenda item number 11, developing a mobile device policy, guidance for South Lanarkshire Schools 2025, and can invite Gary Lambert to speak to the report.
Thank you, Chair. This paper asks committee to note new operational guidance produced by Education Resources to support our head teachers in developing mobile device policies in partnership with their parents and pupils, and thereby tailored to their individual school communities. The document at Appendix 1 is the outcome of a collaborative working group involving head teachers, trade union representatives, parents and pupils. It is designed to add practical value to the national guidance on mobile devices in schools published by the Scottish Government last year, while also setting out minimum standards to protect learning environments in a measured, inclusive and consultative way. That practical advice includes a step-by-step process for policy development through audit, consultation and review, a range of policy models, core standards for legal compliance, safeguarding and digital etiquette, a self-evaluation toolkit and practical tips for implementation, links to national resources and minimum expectations for standards. It's important to note, Chair, that under this guidance, schools retain the authority and support to introduce a range of measures up to and including a complete ban on mobile devices, should they and their communities determine that that is the most appropriate approach for them. Ultimately, this guidance empowers schools to make informed decisions in partnership with our communities. It reflects the trust we have in the professional judgment of our head teachers on these matters, and it supports co-design and co-production with parents and pupils, ensuring policies are inclusive, proportionate and rights respecting. In setting the policies via this guidance, Chair, schools will be expected to take account of children's rights under UNCRC and the voice of children in decisions which affect them. Any disproportionate impacts on vulnerable pupils, including those with medical needs or complex family backgrounds. And finally, excuse me, the opportunities to teach digital literacy through learning on responsible use, online safety and digital citizenship that can be applied both within school and out with. Chair, officers recognise that information technology is a rapidly changing area, as we have discussed in previous committees. We are therefore committed to auditing the implementation of these guidelines annually, reviewing the guidance each year and ensuring their alignment with our curriculum development work on digital literacy and AI. And with that, Chair, I'd refer committee back to the recommendations in section 2 of the report. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Gary. The recommendations are on page 109. Do we have any questions? Councillor Loudon.
Thanks very much, Chair. With your indulgence, I've got a fair bit to say in this. I'm really pleased with this report. I think it's really well done, and I really appreciate the range of stakeholders that have been involved. I've spoken about this before, so I'll try and make it brief, but I've got 2 teenagers who are in a South Lanarkshire high school at the moment. And almost more than a year ago now, they were asked, I was asked as a parent, carers, teachers, we're all consulted over a mobile phone policy. And it's pretty simple. It's basically bag it or box it. That's it. It goes in your school bag or it's in the box. If it's seen, you get it at the end of the class and your parent, your carer is texted. In a piece of very good timing before this committee, we actually were sent, as parents through the newsletter, an evaluation of how that has gone over a year. Most of the young people said their overall screen time has reduced. Their screen time during the school day is reduced. They think it's fair, and they say that they're not hearing phones in classrooms anymore. And further, 100% of staff agreed, 63% strongly agreed that it's had a positive impact on the classroom environment, which of course is the aim of this whole thing all along. Making comments like it's a good policy, which is working well, especially with younger pupils, and it's a simple but effective move towards phone-free classrooms. And the pupils are actually, it's not a static document that's been produced, they're looking at next steps already. Of what they think would be of benefit to them. So looking at through PSE lessons, focusing on screen time, the health benefits of reducing your screen time and so on. So I think it's been a really positive example. It's a wee bit more than bemused. I know we all received a letter as committee members from MP Joni Reid yesterday, who implied that as a committee we should rethink and give schools the power and authority, as she put it, to ban smartphones altogether. We've just heard from Gary that schools absolutely have that under this policy if they want it. Although, as I've just illustrated, when a far less draconian approach has been used successfully, 100% of teachers in that school have agreed it's had a positive impact. Just quickly to finish, Chair, just a few stats. We've got 96% of young people aged 12 to 15 own a smartphone, and that rises to about 99% for those aged 16 to 17. When we've got thousands of high school pupils across South Lanarkshire who've just lost their school transport I think it's entirely reasonable that parents have the expectation that they will be able, this 99% of pupils will be able to have their phone in their bag to keep in touch. So we're talking about hundreds of pupils, and thousands of pupils rather, that are having to walk home in the cold and the dark. So when we've got an MP seriously trying to tell us as a committee we should be saying to those families their children can't have their phone in their bags, or even more bizarrely the suggestion that they should buy a feature phone over and above the phone that their child has already had, I'm going to hazard a guess that that wouldn't be a particularly popular suggestion. Thanks for your indulgence, Chair.
Thank you very much for that comprehensive feedback, Councillor Loudon. And in my capacity as interim chair, I'm satisfied with the approach and the guidance that's going to be offered to our schools to make the right judgment for their demographics, for their parents, for their pupils, for their guardians, to ensure that the policy reflects their needs and their interests. So I'm happy with that. Councillor Frame.
Thanks, Chair. It's just a comment more than a question, Chair, if that's okay. It's again going to the email that we had received yesterday, and from obviously MP Joni Reid, and stating that she wants the mobile phones to be banned. Now, during this time of great expectations and everything that's put on our young children, and also with the loss of the school transport, these phones are actually become more efficient because kids have to check and see when the service bus is due, and they do that by using their mobile phones. Now, if they can't get a school bus because it's been taken off, and they can't use their mobile phones to check for bus times, how are these kids going to get home? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Frame. Councillor Logan.
All right, thank you very much, Chair. I do believe that we live in a democracy, and in a democracy, people are entitled to put forward whatever views that they like, and if everybody else agrees, that's fine. If they don't agree, that's fine. I think we're accepting the paper, and we're the people who democracy has deemed that we should be sitting here, and I'm a great believer, if the people want to hear, that's just where you'll be. So therefore, I think that it's right that we accept the paper. I can only speak for the high school that I attend on a very regular basis. I've only got the one high school in Carluke, and it was a very thorough process, and they spoke to, as was already stated, pupils and parents and engaged widely. And I think our officers have put out a good paper, and if I'm reading this right, each school then can, if they choose, whatever they're doing just doesn't fit the bill, they can tweak it or do whatever they think they would be necessary, by going through the parent council, whatever they're going to do. So I think, well, I never throw stones because I live in the glass house. So I think people are entitled to put their views forward, but we're accepting this, and I have great faith in all our schools, in all our head teachers, and all our staff, and the pupils and parents. So therefore, I think it will sort itself eventually. And it might be that one shoe doesn't fit everybody, but they will make the arrangements to suit themselves. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Logan. As Gary said, it's not going to be a bit of guidance that will be... Logan, it is not going to be a bit of guidance that's shelved. It's going to be something that will be audited on an annual basis, and should we need to come back to the committee to make any amendments or adaptations, we certainly will. Thank you very much. Can I ask the committee to note the report?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Agenda item number 12, Education Standards and Quality Report 24-25, and can I invite Stuart Nixon to speak to the report?
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, everybody. The purpose of this paper is to present the Education Resources Standards and Quality Report for session 2024-25. The report's attached as Appendix 1 of the paper on page 131, and it sets out a summary, quite a comprehensive summary, I would say, of the work and the achievements of education in the past year. It's very much a positive paper. I hope you'll agree. It's intended to be celebratory and optimistic, as well as providing an objective view of the work that's been done. Section 3 on page 127 makes clear the link between the Council's vision and education priorities as they're shown in paragraph 3.4. Section 4 of the paper on page 128 notes there's a statutory requirement to provide this report, and also that it is intended to be accessible for all stakeholders, and as such we try to keep jargon to a minimum to make sure that it is readable, it's accessible, and that everybody will find something in there of interest to them. Section 5 highlights strong performance in a number of areas, particularly around school inspections, the ongoing focus on our most vulnerable children and young people, the use of data to inform our planning and improve outcomes, and as ever, progress with those outcomes are reported to this committee in our Q2 and Q4 resource plan updates. Chair, I know members will have a range of highlights from the report that they would want to pick out, and I would want to finish by commending the work of our children and young people, and acknowledge the commitment and the expertise and skill of those who support them in school, irrespective of their roles, and also across the resource. As such, I'd invite committee to approve the recommendation in section 2 of the paper that the Education Resources Standards and Quality Report for session 2024-25 be noted. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, Stuart. The recommendations are on page 127. Do we have any questions or comments? None have been intimated. Can I ask the committee to note the report?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Agenda item number 13, Brighter Start Breakfast Fund Award. Can I invite David Hinshelwood to speak to the report?
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. Purpose of the report is to update the committee on a successful funding bid to the Brighter Start Breakfast Fund. The key points, the background to this is that Inspiring Scotland had funding available to support breakfast clubs across Scotland. At 3.4, South Lanarkshire Council has received £146,450 from Inspiring Scotland under the Increased Opportunities for Play category, and have procured resources listed in Appendix 1 in page 166. This includes indoor and outdoor games and arts and craft resources. At 3.5 outlines the current provision of breakfast clubs across the authority, where primary schools offer free breakfast clubs via 2 models. Toast and Go, this is primarily where we have schools where the majority of pupils come in via transport, and standard breakfast clubs that operate from 8:15 to 8:45. At 3.6 gives you an idea of the attendance of the breakfast clubs at the moment. We have over 1,860 pupils attending weekly. And at 4.1 outlines education benefits of this, improving well-being and readiness to learn, enhanced social interaction, physical activity and creative engagement, supports development of communication, problem solving and collaboration skills, and promotes equity for disadvantaged pupils. In section 5, the delivery is that the head teachers have been informed at the start of term what resources they have been aligned to get from this, and they are already in use amongst a number of our schools. And if I can take you back to 2.1 for the recommendations. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, David. A very welcome report, and I have had some great feedback from some head teachers through attending the Parent Council meeting, so that's a very welcome report. The recommendations are on page 163. Do we have any comments or questions? Councillor Loudon.
Thanks, Chair. Obviously, I'm going to absolutely welcome the Scottish Government funding for this specific purpose. I think it's a great idea. I've got a few questions about how this has been allocated. I'd also been to a school just after these papers came out and was told that these boxes had just sort of appeared. Have we really given 36 hula hoops and 12 bats to each school, regardless of whether they've got about 40 pupils like Gilmerton Primary or about 500 pupils like Woodside Primary? So they've either got one bit of playground chalk each, or they've got one bit of playground chalk between about 10 pupils. Why has it been allocated in this way?
David.
Obviously, I'll look at those individual circumstances. The allocation was based on the number of pupils within the school, so they shouldn't have got blanket resources, but I can certainly look into that if there's been an error in the distribution of that, Councillor.
Councillor Loudon.
Yeah, that would be really helpful, thanks, because it really wasn't very clear from this as well. And I would like to think that in the future, if we have an opportunity to do something like this again, there will be a bit more back and forward with the schools, just to make sure there's no doubling up. I know a lot of groups such as parent councils and friends of groups have done fantastic work for some of our schools in raising money for this kind of resource to already be in the school. Other schools might have spent some PEF money, for example, on play resources. So for them just to get boxes appearing, very well intentioned, it's for a great purpose, but I think it could have been done in a slightly better way. Thanks.
Just quickly, obviously there was the timing of when the funding was made available, when the bids had to put in, and obviously in and around that with the summer break for the schools as well. So there was limited opportunity to actually, you know, do further consultation with schools, but certainly take that on board for any further funding we may receive. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you very much. Councillor Frame.
Yep, thanks very much, Chair. Just on the same note, as well, it's just to do with like more rural schools who are generally smaller schools. They don't have a big storage space, so they're struggling just now to store the equipment that they've got without having more equipment put in. It's just to see if we could maybe be looking to see if how we're helping them store these extra items that have been given. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Frame. I'll ask David to touch base with you following the meeting to see if there's any assistance that could be offered. Thank you. Councillor Logan.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I'm a very positive person, always have been. Get up in the morning and think this is a new day. So I think that I'm not going to be negative about anything in this report. I'm going to be very positive. I think it's a great thing, and I think the breakfast clubs throughout our area are fantastic resource for any school, and anything that comes will be worth it. I can tell you from people that I've spoke to, and somebody even in my own family, their child would not take a breakfast, just no matter what you put out, but she loved to go and get tea and toast with friends. So she was a bit shy, and that was a great social sort of thing for them. And I think it brings out the best in children. And I think I read there about equity, and I think it makes everybody equal. The social interaction, and it's no, oh well, you need to get it, but whatever it is in the schools that I know. So I think it's a great thing. I'm pleased that we got the money, very much so, and I like to give praise for praise is due. And I know, only in my own ward, obviously I know the schools in my own ward, if there's money going there, it will be absolutely well used, because in their town I have great schools and I'm always grateful for them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Logan. Councillor Loudon, you want to come back in with the last final one?
Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate you speaking from sort of a position of positivity, Eileen. The problem is the schools haven't been given money for them to then well use it. The schools have just been given items which they might already have, or as Councillor Frame has said, they might be struggling to store it. As I said right at the beginning, I think this is great. It's a very positive idea, it's a positive fund, and I'm sure that our schools will do wonderful things with the resources they've been given. This is just the point that when money is tight, when budgets are tight, and we're looking at how schools can best spend money, they really need to have a better level of input. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your questions and comments. Committee, could I ask the committee to note the report?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. And agenda item number 14, consultation responses. Can I invite Aisling Boyle to speak to the report?
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to inform the committee of the response submitted by Education Resources as part of an ongoing consultation exercise at local and national level regarding the revision of the guidance on appropriate qualifications and teacher competencies for teachers of children and young people who are blind or partially sighted, deaf or deafblind. South Lanarkshire Council's formal response is attached in Appendix 1. Section 4.3 points out key highlights from their consultation response. Mandatory qualifications. Teachers appointed to specialist sensory roles, specifically as teachers of the deaf or qualified teachers of children with visual impairment, are contractually required to complete a relevant postgraduate qualification within 5 years of starting the post. Failure to meet this requirement may result in reassignment to a different role. Over the past 10 years, South Lanarkshire Council has experienced only one such reassignment, indicating strong compliance with this requirement. Proposed regulatory changes. Emerging national proposals suggest reducing the timeframe for completing the mandatory postgraduate from 5 to 3 years. This proposed change has raised concerns amongst South Lanarkshire practitioners, who argue that the 3-year limit does not sufficiently accommodate individual personal circumstances that may impact the ability to complete the qualification in time. The response advocates for retaining the current 5-year timeframe to ensure fairness and support for affected staff. Professional recognition and standards. The consultation also covers the formal adoption of the GTC for Scotland Standards for Registration of Sensory Teaching Roles. This is positively received as it would provide official professional recognition for specialist sensory teachers. Such formal recognition strengthens the status and the specialist identity of these roles, promotes national consistency and supports effective planning for PRD and for career-long professional learning within the sensory support teams. I refer back to section 2 and ask that the content is noted.
Thank you very much, Aisling. The recommendations are on page 167. Councillor Ferguson has requested to speak.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report. Just with regards to the report on page 172, now, having a look at that, in the first box, it says there now, there's a mention of the word deaf, and I think it's the way that the language is used. When you talk about the word deaf, as in lowercase or uppercase d and smaller case d, that refers to, if it's a lowercase d, it's somebody who's hard of hearing, or lowercase d is somebody who is a sign language user. So there seems to be a bit of confusion within the report on when that language is used. So if somebody's reading that, it flips between uppercase d and lowercase d. So there's not that recognition where sign language users are intimated in the report. So it's the report itself isn't as inclusive because it doesn't include the sign language users in the sense where if it's a lowercase d, then they are somebody who's hearing, who then loses their hearing later on and is not a sign language user. So you need to use the language, which is the D/big D, deaf language, and that then will make the report included. And I'm just a little bit disappointed that report's been submitted prior to that, because that could have been an easy fix. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ferguson, and thank you very much for bringing that to our attention. Aisling, have you got anything further to add on the specifics? Thank you. Thank you.
I just want to say, echo what you said, that we welcome all the advice that we can
Would you just repeat that just for clarity?
I'm glad everyone else heard that. I wasn't sure. I just wanted to say that we're welcoming any advice that we can have from that, and that we can take that forward. That's great.
Thank you very much, Aisling. Thank you again, Councillor Ferguson. Agenda item 15, urgent business. None have been intimated. There are a few action points from the meeting which I'll update members accordingly. But with that, I will... Oh, sorry. I will ask the committee to note the report, agenda item 14, the consultation responses. Thank you. No urgent item business, and I will close the meeting with that. Thank you very much for your attendance.